Hey everybody, welcome to the Irresistible Brand Podcast. I am Matt Deutschman. I'm the owner of Doubletake Promotional Marketing. And since 2010, we've been helping colleges and universities and corporations in various industries with promotional products and branded merchandise. And over the years, the four key strategic initiatives we typically support with promotional products are client appreciation, referral generation, employee engagement and retention, and recruiting and onboarding. Companies that execute these four areas well develop an irresistible brand, which clients can't help but refer to others, employees can't help but promote, and recruits can't wait to join. Thus, the Irresistible Brand Podcast, where I talk with other leaders in those key strategic areas. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Irresistible Brand Podcast today. My guest is Ben Shrader. Ben is a partner at Hart McLaughlin Eldridge in Chicago. He handles a wide variety of legal matters in the areas of commercial litigation, digital media law, labor and employment, class actions and mass torts, and civil rights. He's a former sports broadcaster, and Ben has an active sports and entertainment law practice and is the chair of the Chicago Bar Association Sports Law Committee. He's a contributing writer for sports law site conductdetrimental.com, easy for me to say. And he's written columns for the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin's Sporting Judgment section. And so I thought it would be really cool to bring Ben in to have a conversation about some recent news stories that kind of intersect between branding and also sports law, where he's an expert. First of all, Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, no, Matt, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. As you kind of noted, there's no shortage of things to talk about. Personal branding is like the phrase du jour, right? And more so for sports and athletes than ever before. So I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a few different topics. Tom Brady rolled out his own personal Pantone color. I've got my brand new Pantone book here with all the colors. I don't know if Brady Blue is in this book. I'll have to check it out, but he's got his very own Pantone color. He's got a line of clothing, and he's involved in the NFT space. And then we've also got a couple other things to talk about with regard to name, image, and likeness in the NCAA. Ohio State basketball players are coming out with their own line of clothing that they're selling, and the players are getting all of the proceeds. So that's a pretty groundbreaking development in the world of college sports and the NIL, name, image, and likeness space. So lots to talk about. Full disclosure, we're recording this on January 21st. We're going to be talking about Tom Brady and some timely things. This episode, if you're watching it or listening, is airing the week of the Super Bowl. So Ben, who you got in the Super Bowl? It's going to be a pretty good game, right? I think that team might win. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never, I don't think, not enjoyed a Super Bowl before. So, I expect that this was no different. And I can almost guarantee that Tom Brady is involved somehow or another. Going to talk about.
Yeah, and I think, offense is going to be important. Defense also, maybe even some special teams. That's going to be a difference maker in this game. And that one guy, he was really good in Pee Wee football. Shocked that he's never won a Super Bowl before. So, we'll see if he gets his ring, right? That guy.
Yeah, I mean, the stories have been really good as usual. I think we can expect that the team that scores more points and more often is going to have a really good chance to win.
Really good chance, yeah.
And so hopefully it's a close game, and I think the better team will end up winning.
Yeah, it's a really good analysis. Thanks. The refs too, they're always involved.
So. We know they'll be.
So aside from that, let's talk about Brady Blue first. Let's talk about the Brady Blue Pantone color. And in our world of promotional marketing, we deal with Pantone colors all the time. It's extremely important for brands to identify what their Pantone colors are. Pantone, for anyone who doesn't know, is the PMS, the Pantone matching system, which is a color matching system to ensure that if you say, this exact shade of blue is your color, for us, our colors at Doubletake are orange and blue. We have very specific shades of orange and blue that are printed on all of our merchandise. But your computer monitor looks different from my computer monitor. The colors are never going to be exactly the same. And if you print that shade of orange and blue on paper or on a plastic item or on a stainless steel item, you're never going to get the exact shade of orange and blue unless you ensure that we have some kind of system for standardization. So that's what Pantone does, is every shade of every color is assigned a number. So you can see here in my Pantone books what the numbers all are. And then there's corresponding ways of kind of shifting those colors for use on different materials, whether you're printing on paper or on promotional products, or for use on the web to show up on your computer monitor. So that's just kind of an overview of what Pantone is all about. And Tom Brady has created his own Pantone shade of blue. Ben, what do you have to say about that with regard to the legal aspect?
Yeah, I mean, from a legal aspect, I think it's probably a smart move. It ensures really, one of a kind, not only from a branding perspective, but from a legal perspective. I'm not sure if you can I'm not sure if you can trademark Pantones, but it almost doesn't matter, right? Because if you're going to call it Brady blue, it gets an assigned number, but that color is going to be synonymous with him. And I think it's interesting, what you've seen Brady do in that respect. He's always kind of been around and in the lexicon, especially for sports fans. But the way he's really focused his business and the way he's really focused his personal branding in the last few years, I think has been notable and interesting. I think this Brady blue for his new brand, Brady, is another step in that direction. You can't, it's hard to trademark, a name like that. It's hard to, keep things, tight and clean, legally speaking, almost with simple stuff like that. But he's going to be synonymous with that, with that name, with that color. You're seeing kind of simple, clean, branding, which I think is part of his kind of brand, which we can talk about. And I'm not sure we've seen this before, really, in terms of somebody having their own color. You certainly don't see it very often.
Yeah. I've seen, in our world, we work with a lot of colleges and universities. And so certainly every college and university that we work with is very, it's very important that their logo is printed in their exact Pantone colors. So if it's, their exact shade of red, there can't be a variation on that red, because then it can be a distortion of the likeness of that university. But yeah, I've seen my alma mater, Northwestern, I believe, came out with their own shade of purple a couple of years ago. When they did a little bit of a brand refresh, they had their own shade of purple that kind of got added to the Pantone book. But I've never seen an individual do that, and I'm sure other brands have done it, but I don't know that I've ever seen an individual as high profile as Tom Brady doing this. Something just interesting to note is that Pantone and Tom Brady both pointed out that his shade of blue is not the same blue as the New England Patriots, but it was just chosen. The reasoning behind the blue is that I'm going to read their quote, it's to embolden the next generation to new heights and give off strength and confidence. So what say you, Ben, about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson in branding, right? I mean, it's dark blue. The first reaction everyone had is like, oh, that looks pretty similar to the Patriots blue, but it's really just a dark blue. I think the more interesting aspect of it is not only the individuality, but I've seen some things where the Brady brand. I mean, Brady's got multiple brands now, right? He's had his TB12 brand kind of in conjunction with Under Armour. That's been the more athletic wear for years. He's been an Under Armour endorser for years. TB12 is now almost been kind of an athletic lifestyle brand. Tom Brady's personal brand, I think, has always been, or is kind of evolved over time, but always kind of centered around, this sort of sustained excellence from humble beginnings. He's famously a 6th round draft pick, won more Super Bowls than anyone else, thrown more touchdowns, more yards, more completions than anybody else, all from a guy who was barely drafted. There's a famous, viral image that goes around every now and again of the resume he made when he was leaving Michigan. or he listed like his internship with Morgan Stanley, and he thought he was going to have to go into, investment banking or something because he wasn't sure if he was going to get a shot in the NFL. Now that's almost impossible to picture given the success he's had. But you've seen that, his personal kind of workout regimen is legendary, and his athletic brand has always sort of been tied into that lifestyle, the diet, the working out, that TB12 athletic stuff, which you're seeing more and more. And you're starting to see not only, he's wearing it, there are retail stores popping up. That's gotten a lot bigger. But the Brady brand is interesting because it's a little bit more, fashion focused. Tom Brady's gone from a guy who basically is legendary for never doing anything but, going to bed at 7:30 at night, waking up at 4:30 and doing, football related things for the entire time he's awake, watching film, working out, legendary for that kind of stuff. That's the kind of lifestyle you have to have if you're going to play until you're, 44 years old and beyond. Right. But over the last few years, I think you've seen him sort of evolve from that to getting into a lot more things that are not as football related. Maybe they set him up for his post-football life, but the Brady brand is more of a kind of a lifestyle fashion brand. Brady's always been kind of this stoic character, but he happens to be married to one of the most, famous supermodels in the world. And now he's getting into more of this fashion related stuff. The guy who's running the Brady brand is somebody that has launched clothing lines for the Kardashians and Chrissy Teigen, and folks like that. And so you're seeing kind of a move into away from sort of the Tom Brady Patriots football stuff to Tom Brady, the business. And I think the brand reflects that. And I've seen it compared to the Jordan brand. Jordan was always synonymous with the Bulls and basketball and whatnot. Sure. Now it vacillates a little bit back and forth between Jordan brand and Adidas. Jordan's a subsidiary of Nike, but Jordan is often the second biggest sneaker and apparel brand in the world. And so it's more synonymous with him, and he's branched out from the Bulls. They sponsor other teams. They sponsor college teams. I think industry people are sort of viewing the Brady brand as a potential, a thing like the Jordan brand, where it's just transcends, just football, a certain team, and just kind of is almost like a monolith in football. We haven't really seen that. Football is the ultimate team game, right? Quarterback's a very glamorous position, but football is the ultimate team game more so than, basketball or even baseball. So I think the transition's been interesting, I think. So
I think you covered a lot there. And what's interesting, so you said that TB12 has been affiliated with Under Armour, right? And so it's a really good kind of parallel to that, to the Air Jordan brand and the Jordan brand being a subsidiary of Nike. How do you see that unfolding as far as, do you see, college teams sort of adopting the Brady brand for their apparel through the Under Armour channel in some way? Do you see that becoming like an entire entity within this undertaking?
I could certainly see that. Yeah. I mean, he's the guy. And if they want to capitalize, teams want to be associated, with that kind of, excellence and that kind of profile. I think you're going to see that a little bit more. It's a little different in some respects. But Jordan brand wasn't even really its own brand for the longest time. And now it's its own thing, and they have their own logos, and it's kind of branched off. I think truthfully, the sky's the limit, for Tom Brady. I mean, he's the perfect example of he can basically take this as far as he wants. I think you'll see things, Under Armour's had their own sort of issues in general, and have ramped down their licensing and partnerships. I think in college sports, the Brady brand is separate from that right now. Mm-hmm. And I think will remain so, and is more, sort of fashion, athleisure, lifestyle based.
Sure.
You can see it kind of going anywhere, right? Assuming it does well, which I'm sure it will. You can see them transitioning into, athletic wear. You can see them transitioning into, more partnership based stuff, more sponsorship based stuff. Obviously Brady's still playing. He's still wearing Under Armour. He's still, a huge endorser. So I don't think there's going to be any competition, between quote unquote Brady and Under Armour, obviously, for a while. But who knows, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, assuming he's not still playing, he could be. I think you'll see, I think he's kind of setting himself up, and I'm sure that's one of the options they're considering.
Gotcha. Do you see this as being a potential issue at all from a legal licensing, name, image, likeness standpoint with players on other teams being restricted from wearing Brady brand merchandise, or from college players being restricted is there any concern to look at there, given that if this is probably, it's one thing for a player to be endorsed by a brand. It's another for a player to have their own brand. If a player is on, is there any restriction on players on teams other than the Bucks wearing Brady brand merchandise? Does anything like that exist, or is there anything kind of coming in the future as far as that goes?
As far as the college stuff, the college kids are essentially kind of restricted to wearing, at least outwardly, at least during the games, what their schools are partnered up with. So if you're at a Nike school, you pretty much have to wear the Nike stuff. And, there are limitations, even within the NIL schemes is its whole own world that's still forming in college. Right. And so there are typically kind of restrictions on what kind of deals, players can do, in certain states that conflict with their own school. So it's tough for, a kid who's at a Nike school having to wear Nike, clothing to do an NIL deal with another kind of competing apparel brand. You probably won't see that as much, like during the game, particularly.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense during the games. I think, and especially at the college level, at the NFL level, is there any concern as far as that goes? Is there any jurisdiction that a team has over what their players can do? Can a team restrict their player from doing something to sort of represent the brand of a player on an opposing team? Is this sort of uncharted territory? And
not really. You're not going to be able to use the team logo, for example. All the NFL uniforms are made by Nike, right? So every NFL uniform jersey is a Nike jersey. Guys are allowed to wear. The NFL has interesting rules on this stuff, right? Because they're allowed to wear, or they're only allowed to really outwardly wear or show brands that are partnered with the NFL. Also, I think that's limited right now to Nike, Under Armour, and Adidas, at least for the most part. So those are the kind of cleats you can wear, and if you want to wear something else, you kind of have to tape it up. And so even though it's Nike's the sponsor, you can wear, like, Tom Brady can wear Under Armour cleats. And that's those are kind of NFL specific rules. But, if a player on another team wants to endorse the Brady brand, there's really, nothing, I don't think, to prevent that. And it's interesting you bring up the college stuff because the Brady brand did sign, I think, 10 college athletes to NIL deals to promote the Brady brand through the name, image, and likeness scheme. And so I think that's, really interesting, obviously, because they're going to be at schools that aren't wearing Brady stuff. But again, the Brady brand, quote unquote Brady brand, is only a lifestyle brand for right now. They're making $100 sweatshirts and, backpacks and joggers and things like that.
Right.
And so you've seen, that company sign a handful of athletes, including Deion Sanders' son is probably the most, recognizable of the group, but they got football players. They have a tennis player or two. They have at least one baseball player. So it's not just football and it's not just basketball. They're spreading it around a little bit. And so these are kids that are now being associated, with that Brady brand for an NIL perspective. So, you'll see that, I think, more, especially as the brand grows. This thing's pretty brand new. Right. And so, I just expect it'll do well. I expect, the people running it, I think, are very successful at, running these types of companies and having these types of brands. I expect it'll do well, and I expect it'll continue to grow. So I think you'll see a lot more of these deals.
So will you see, since it is like you mentioned several times, it's a lifestyle brand. This is not the type of thing you're going to see guys wearing on the sidelines. This
Right.
is
He's not making cleats. He's not making,
right.
Workout stuff. Right.
Right. So this is what I'm envisioning is, when you tune in at the beginning of an NFL game and, or even a college game, and they show the kind of the footage of the guys getting off the team bus and walking in, and they've all got and there's a lot of thought that goes in for some of the players of what they're going to be wearing, because they know the camera crews are going to be there. So I guess number one, that's a huge opportunity to market the Brady brand. You're going to see these guys who are affiliated with it wearing their Brady gear during those shots. And is that where, any of that sort of jurisdictional issue may crop up, where again, on the NFL side, is it an issue if the Bucs are about to play the Packers? And again, January 21st here, no predictions, but Bucs are about to play the Packers. Is someone getting out, someone on the Packers walking from the team bus into the stadium wearing the Brady brand? Are the Packers like, hey, what is going on? We're about to play this team. You can't be repping the brand of the guy on the opposing team. Is that an issue? And then, I guess also how does that impact college? It seems like, that those rules are still being written. And they have signed, like I said, 10 college athletes to the brand.
Yeah, aside from the legal and business side of it, practically speaking, I think as long as he's playing, you're gonna have locker room issues. If guys are coming out in Brady stuff to face Brady, you see it and the college stuff. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue. Obviously, Brady's this guy up here, NFL legend. The college kids, I think, are especially, like I said, we've already seen some NIL deals with him. I'd almost compare it a little bit to, in basketball. There's not that many people in basketball, relatively speaking, that have signature sneakers, right? And so you will see players wearing the signature sneakers of guys they're playing against, from time to time. Like Giannis's sneakers are really popular. Kyrie Irving's and Kevin Durant's sneakers are really popular. You'll sometimes see opponents wearing, a pair of Kyrie Irving's to play Kyrie Irving. Right. And so that I've always thought is an interesting, sort of dynamic. It never really been that big of a deal because, there's only so many options at that high end. Most of the guys in the NBA are wearing Nikes, and most of the best Nikes for a lot of these guys happen to be signature shoes of other players. And so you see that a little bit. Will we see that with the Brady stuff? Probably not yet. And football's a little different, but it's possible. And I think it'll just become more normal,
Gotcha. I had my, I had my Rawlings glove with the Roberto Alomar fake signature inside when I was a kid. So I think, maybe I wasn't a Roberto Alomar fan, but until he joined the Mets. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about, you did mention kind of briefly the crypto tie-in with the Brady brand and NFT. So what does that foray look like for the Brady brand as well, and for just that whole kind of new exploration?
The crypto thing, I think, is getting really big in sports, generally speaking. Tom Brady has recently become an endorser in FTX, the crypto currency exchange. Not only that, but it's taken an equity stake. Steph Curry did something similar. You're seeing guys take salaries in Bitcoin, or it gets pretty publicized.
Beckham, right?
You're seeing that more and more. I think it's part of his overall sort of next level strategy. Cryptocurrency is kind of on the rise and one of the next bigger things, and he's getting in sort of an equity position at, I wouldn't say the ground floor, but fairly early, and something that's certainly growing. That stuff obviously ties in with the NFTs, which is the other big thing. I don't think anyone had ever heard the phrase, anyone casual observer had ever heard the phrase NFT before this time last year. Now it's everywhere. Leagues are all going to be doing these deals. Players individually are doing these deals. Tom Brady's done some personal kind of setting up some NFT deals and partnerships. I think he's just you're seeing, you went from seeing him kind of not involved in all that many things to now he's got his hand and his brand in a lot of different areas that I think are sort of more cutting edge and more, on the rise things like, NFTs is a great example too. I think it's just his kind of part of the overall strategy.
I think the bottom line or the underlying theme in all of this is that he's making rumblings for his post NFL career, and love Brady or hate Brady, he's not going away anytime soon from the public eye once whether his NFL career is anywhere near done. So
yeah, I mean, it's funny. He's played for over 20 years, right? And you went from almost hearing or seeing not much about him other than he's a really hard worker and he's really disciplined and, he's a winner, right? That's really all. Mm-hmm. He wasn't always a huge endorser. He wasn't always sort of one of those. He's probably always been marketable to a degree. But you haven't seen, no one was comparing him to Michael Jordan from a marketing and business standpoint, 10 years ago, I don't think. But now, he's everywhere. Just in the last, couple of years, he's done deals with FTX. He's done deals with, he's got the NFT, he's got the personal brand. He's hawking Subway sandwiches, which everyone's first reaction is there's no way Tom Brady eats Subway sandwiches, and probably spit that out right after the end of the commercial. He's endorsing Hertz rental cars. He's in commercials now for their kind of like electric fleet of rental cars. He's almost now everywhere all of a sudden, which I think speaks to your point of setting himself up for life after football, whenever that is. But I think it's a really interesting kind of shift in this phase of his career.
Let's talk to shift gears. Let's talk Ohio State men's basketball. So let's maybe start at the beginning. So the ultimate, the news story is Ohio State's men's basketball team. They've created their own line of clothing, and the players themselves are deriving the direct profits from the sales of the clothing. So really interesting development there, especially in light of the new name, image, likeness regime that's gone into place in the NCAA. Way back at the beginning, my buddy Kane Coulter, he's not my buddy, but he was my college quarterback for Northwestern. Yeah. Kind of led the charge with the Northwestern football team several years ago to look into unionizing and really kind of leading this movement toward NCAA athletes benefiting financially from their name, image, and likeness. And I've got my opinions and kind of my own personal just experience with I shouldn't say personal experience, but my own memories of that team. I mean, it was a great Northwestern football team, and I think in a lot of ways the focus on that aspect kind of off the field may have taken the focus away from football in those years. That's what some of the commentary has been about, and in the aftermath of all that. But that sort of led the charge to where we are now. So can you take us through, I guess, like from, especially with your legal expertise, like the history of that movement of players starting the process and now being able to benefit from NIL, and and then we'll get into this really groundbreaking thing with the Ohio State basketball team, and then maybe where it goes in the future.
Yeah, I mean, this has been percolating for a while. Just to where we are now is the Supreme Court's decision in the case of Alston essentially allowed, a little more complicated, but essentially has allowed or opened the door for college athletes to be able to monetize and profit from their name, their image, and their likeness. And this is something that's been going on for a long time. The famous sort of case from years back was filed by Ed O'Bannon and dealt with EA Sports and the college video games using players' name, image, and likeness. Remember back to when we were kids, when all these games were popular, they weren't using the names of the college players, but 31 on UCLA who's left-handed and 6'8" and has a shaved head, and forward 31 they're not calling him Ed O'Bannon, but you know exactly who they're talking about. And that's been going on for years with video games. And you go to get a college player's jersey. They don't have the names on them, but you know who, Northwestern's number 7 is. Like, you know whose jersey that you're buying. And forever, players have not at all been able to monetize or profit or share in any revenue whatsoever. And so, you see the O'Bannon case was kind of a groundbreaker, but nothing really concrete kind of happened for a few years. You get into the last few years, different states start to pass laws that allow for college athletes to, profit off their name, image, and likeness. You're seeing a few states here and there who are allowing high school students now to profit off their name, image, and likeness. Not very many. And there's still a lot of states that don't have NIL laws too. So it's a little bit all over the place. It's pretty new. But to speaks to your point of this idea of player empowerment, I think for the longest time, I've always been one of these, like, pay the players. The schools and the conferences, especially the networks, are making so much money off this stuff. And it's on the backs of the players. The coaches are making $8 million a year, but the players, barely have enough to eat, that kind of thing. And so this idea of player empowerment, you saw it a little bit with the Northwestern bid to look at forming a union. You're seeing it now with the name, image, and likeness stuff that's growing. You're seeing kind of a revisitation of that potential unionization of college athletes, collective bargaining. The big difference, well, there are a lot of big differences, but one of the major differences between the professional leagues, legally speaking, and the college kids and students is that in the leagues, the players are all their contracts and everything else is collectively bargained for. That's a labor law, scheme. College doesn't have that. It's a little bit of a Wild West. There's different state laws. You're already seeing the competition for recruiting and what are we allowed to do here? What are we allowed to do in terms of name, image, and likeness? Because this is really the way they can kind of cash in on their popularity and on their, ability to, form partnerships with brands and things like that. And so, the Ohio State basketball thing, I think is a great example because it embodies this idea of athlete and student empowerment, right? They're now able to take their popularity, their closeness, their ability to, there's a very popular team in Ohio, very well known. And so, they're able to band together and profit off that outside of, the confines of Ohio State. They're not licensing the Ohio State logo. They're not, they're not forming a contract partnership necessarily for this stuff with Ohio State. They're using their own popularity, using their own ingenuity to make money, theoretically. I mean, I don't know if they've made any money yet, but theoretically, though, to make money on this kind of stuff, which was never allowed before, and which, of course, should be allowed. Any other popular college student that doesn't play basketball or football, they get popular for something, they get really good at something, they can monetize that. Everything's a free market except college sports to some degree. So it's, this is a perfect example of it, I think, because it's, they're taking that, popularity, which could be a small window, and they're able to profit on it. I think it's great.
Yeah, wasn't there a kicker for or a punter for Oregon or for a team a few years ago who would make like hilarious YouTube videos and was like an aspiring comedian, really? And so this was like his, and he would make these viral comedy YouTube videos, and then when he started to look into like getting sponsorships or anything like that, he was basically banned from doing that and restricted from even recording videos because he was a student athlete at the same time. So it's that same type of thing. Like, even if it's completely unrelated to what you're doing on the field, there was such a stringent restriction. So what's interesting to me about the Ohio State players is that, like you mentioned, they're not using any of the Ohio State branding, and it's the graphic it says Players Edition, and it says 123 on it because this is the 123rd Ohio State basketball season, or 123rd Ohio State basketball team. And so I guess their plan is, it's convenient that it's 1, 2, 3. It's kind of a cool number to start with, but I guess the plan is for next year to be 124 and so on and so forth. But like you said, it's state by state jurisdiction at this point. So does the state of Ohio, I take it that the state of Ohio obviously allows this. Are there certain states that would take the approach of saying, well, you wouldn't have this fame and have this marketability if not for the support that you're getting from the state funded university, so you're restricted from selling T-shirts and earning a profit without kind of cutting in the university into the revenue sharing as well? Are there states that kind of take that approach?
Yeah, it's all over the place, right? So some states are not allowing it at all. Some states are allowing it kind of unfettered. Some states there's limitations. Some areas have like school specific rules, right? Like there are certain states, I think I want to say Louisiana is one of them, where you're not even allowed to use the colors from the school. So like an athlete at LSU couldn't use the purple and yellow combination.
Different Pantone color maybe, but just not purple and yellow, or it would have to be indistinguishable.
Whatever the school colors are, right? Which I think is so silly and so short-sighted, right? Because this stuff's good for the schools too. It's good for, the school's branding. It's good for, if you have an athlete that popular that they're going to be able to monetize their popularity and their name, image, and likeness, that's good for the school. Like you want them to be able to put that out there and you want to be associated with people like that. And I think it's going to, you're seeing it a lot in recruiting too. It's, how these schools, I think the next big frontier in how these schools handle helping facilitate deals for their players, or helping facilitate, or at least make the environment one in which players can go out and kind of get deals, is a huge recruiting advantage. Right. And so kids want to be at schools where they're going to have better opportunities. That's divorced from NIL, divorced from sports. This is just a specific example of that. And so I think that's going to be, the next kind of wave of where are my best opportunities. If I'm a well-known football player and that means where are my best opportunities to enhance my personal brand and grow my reach and be allowed to do all these kind of things, I'm going to look at that. Because in a sense, most big time college sports programs are sort of interchangeable to a degree. So where am I going to have my best opportunities to grow and to have to enhance my profile and cash in on what is probably going to be a limited window of uber popularity. So I think you're going to see that a lot too. The answer to your question from a legal perspective is it's all over the place. I mean, it's ever changing. There's been calls for kind of Congress to deal with this stuff through federal legislation, because it's all state by state right now. I don't think they've been really wanting to get involved, and there's nothing really in process from a federal perspective. So you're leaving it to the states, and I think that's going to continue to be the case for a while, and it's very, very fluid.
And to kind of to tie in the first part of what we were talking about, and then this last part with regard to Brady's brand and the tie-in with Under Armour and Nike with Jordan and that sort of thing, and how teams can be restrictive of what brands their players are seen wearing. Is there anything that impacts this from like what the Ohio State players are doing? If Ohio State University is connected with the Nike brand or with Under Armour for their jerseys and for what apparel players can be seen wearing on the sidelines and so forth, is there any concern with regard to this, Team 123 Players Edition line of apparel? Do they have to be careful at all of what brand, like, can they do that on a Nike shirt if their team is actually has an agreement with Under Armour? Is there any concern there at all, or is it just, we're completely separate, and in the state of Ohio, the law is such that we don't have to be careful with that?
Yeah, I think from both legal and practical standpoint, you're going to kind of see it. I think it's more comparable to like the lifestyle kind of brand kind of stuff. They're still going to have to wear, I think Ohio State's a Nike school, right? So they're still going to have to wear Nike sweatsuits, to the games. They're still going to have obviously be wearing Nike stuff. during the games. But this players edition, 1, 2, 3 they're not making shoes. They're not making, workout apparel. I don't think, at least from what I've seen, it's more
t-shirts
like
and hoodies,
t-shirts, sweatshirts, casual kind of wear. I don't think there's really a conflict there. It gets into sort of the, look at all the players. You talk about players walk into the locker room, and that's like a big thing online. And it's almost like a red carpet into every locker room in the NBA and NFL now. You compare the Brady brand to like guys wearing, designer clothing or something like that. It's more akin to that rather than athletic wear. But the lines blur a little bit, obviously, right? I mean, you're wearing your Buccaneers issued, Nike sweatshirt, or you're wearing like a, Brady brand, much more expensive sweatshirt. Which one's the athletic wear, which one's, leisure wear, right? So I think again, this stuff with the regulatory schemes and the essentially what you're allowed to do and what you're not varies greatly state to state. But I think you'll see sort of that dividing line between what's separate from the school sponsored apparel or clothing versus what is the clothing. And remember, the kids at the schools don't have contracts with Nike. They wear the Nike stuff because Ohio State has that. That's sort of tied in with their scholarships and whatnot. But they're not in contract with the school's endorser. The school is, and so is that it's not a breach of anything, right? It's just you can do what you want on your own time too. They're not regulating what you wear outside of the arena, and so I think this is an extension of that. To answer your question on that.
Cool. Well, final thought, just on all this stuff. So first off, this is a little bit different episode, different nature of an episode here on the Irresistible Brand Podcast. Normally we talk about, what makes a brand irresistible from an HR standpoint and from a business development standpoint. But I think a lot of what we talked about, no one's going to wear this Players Edition brand unless they felt this deep affinity to Ohio State basketball. And no one's going to wear the Brady brand unless they have some sort of a connection to what makes Tom Brady and everything that he stands for irresistible. So I want to close this with a meme that my wife sent me the other day, which absolutely rings true in my life, and I want to see if it rings true with you as well, Ben. She sent me this thing that says, "Men pick their favorite sports team when they're like 11 and let it make them upset for the rest of their life."
Yeah, I saw that on online recently, and it's so relatable, right? It's like you pick what makes you miserable. You don't do that with anything else. You like pick something that upset you, and nobody, it's taboo to switch. So
right. There's more shame. There's more shame in switching, especially if your team is bad, right?
100%. That's the only shame really as a sports fan, is abandoning your team. You can root for a team that literally ruins your weekends for years in a row, and people will respect you for it.
Yeah. Or in baseball, ruins your entire summer and spring and fall, and usually hot stove winter season. So there you go. Let's go Mets. Well, with that, Ben, thank you so much for joining me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Irresistible Brand Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Again, I'm Matt Deutschman from Doubletake Promotional Marketing, where we specialize in promotional products and branded merchandise with a focus on the strategic initiatives of client appreciation, referral generation, employee engagement and retention, and recruiting and onboarding. Organizations that execute those areas well create an irresistible brand. If you haven't checked it out yet, visit doubleTakeBrandBarometer.com for our quick 5-minute assessment to see how well your organization performs in those areas and get some advice on where you can improve and where you can leverage existing strengths. Our mission is to help you make your brand irresistible. See you again next time.